you're done with specification, that means you fleshed out the system, you know it in out. You need to go into the design of, or the architecture of the system. Now when it comes to architecture, is basically a detailed explanation of how the system will work or how the system will be interconnected. And in general, when you're dealing with a customer, the customer does not get a copy of this one because this is your intellectual property basically. So you don't want to give it to customer unless they pay for it. Then you get for it, you give it to them. It includes the flow charts, the block diagram, state machine, and the way the software will be designed. Okay, the way the software will be basically architect. So example is software task, interface to component, etc. So the major components of an architecture, you always have a hardware architecture as well as the software architecture. Sometimes specification and architecture are also are developed in overlapping matter. You're in the process of developing a specification at the same time you're thinking about the architecture. So it doesn't mean that you have to finish the specification and then go to the architecture, right? While developing your architecture, you may find yourself that you need to refine certain things in the specification. Any questions, by the way? Yes.
Do the 18th.
Excuse me?
The specifications in architecture. Do the 18th.
18th of March, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
During spring break.
Oh, it's the week of the spring break?
Yeah, it's this one.
Yeah, we can delay it next week.
I have a question.
Oh, yes?
Is there some things that we're supposed to learn in lab that we should know before we turn in this proposal? Like that we haven't learned yet?
You're learning it now, so...
Yeah, there's some things that we might learn later on that we might need to know to put inside this proposal.
What do you mean? You learn what? The process that I'm talking about now, or?
Not the process, but the actual idea, you know what I mean?
Well, let me talk about that after that presentation. That's a good question, yes. Okay. So the architecture, you have two type or two ways in approaching the architecture, either top-down design that we call or bottom-up design. In the top-down design, basically you start with your big idea, the abstract idea, and you start decomposing that idea in small pieces until you get to the smallest piece that you can handle and design. Okay, that we call top-down design. The bottom-up basically is you begin with a small component that you already had, and you stitch them together so you can have your own system. Okay, so in our case, are we doing top-down design or bottom-up design? Bottom-up basically, because you're doing labs, and while doing labs, you're designing or you're implementing certain components that you're gonna be using later on in the projects. Okay. Real system basically mixes both of them, because sometimes you can't do a proper design if you don't have the components, or if you don't know the components. But in general, it depends on the project. It depends on at what stage of a project. Sometimes you develop a project, and out of that project you can design another project. So you can develop the first one using top-down design, while the second one will have a bottom-up design process. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other one, but you have to think about how you're gonna do it. So after you design, what do you do? Implement. You get to the lab, you develop the code, you connect the components, you solder stuff, you develop the board, right? The things that most people don't like, right? So you capture the schematic, you write the software, you do PCB layouts. You basically take things from the paper to the practice. Okay. Now, this is what most people associate with design. When they say, you know, I'm designing it, that means I'm putting it in a board to, you know, to play with it or to test it. But the design is really putting the idea in the paper. That is what we call about design. Sometimes design phases is the whole process through requirements, specification, architecture, implementation, etc. That's design phases. If you think about it, you know, you have the requirement, then you do specification, then you do the design, and then you go into the implementation. Lots of people think about putting things directly onto the board, testing them, because they think they are wasting time putting things on the paper and in a step by step. But the problem with that is you can get into problems that you won't be able to solve if you don't have a design on the paper, especially when you have a complex system. Now, while doing your architecture, you're gonna find out that some group of the team will be working on different components, right? So one, for instance, will take the software, one will take the hardware, one will take another interface, and you don't have to be together to work on the project, right? Every team member develop his own components based on the architecture. And then in this phase, the implementation is really independent. Of course, you are interacting, you're discussing, you know, all the parts, but you don't have to be all together in the same room to do it. Okay, so